So the first item on the agenda is to review and approve minutes, two sets of minutes, one from January 18th and a second from February 27th. I hope everyone got a chance to review them. Mary, as always, I thought you did a fantastic job of putting really detailed notes together. The only small, and it was just a typographical, a small typographical error, was in the last minutes. Under number 3, it said approves instead of approved, but it was such a small little error. That was the only thing that I saw. Everything else looked great.
Is that the February 27th?
Yeah, it came under number 3, review of 2023 applications, and it was preservation restrictions developed and approved, and instead of approves as it currently says. But that was the only small thing that I saw.
Well,
did anyone else see anything else?
Well, there's the one huge thing, and that is on the top of the February 27th minutes. I believe it says January 18 by accident, so that has to be corrected.
Yeah.
And on the January 18, I just heard from
Alana Aubrey.
Yeah, and I thought I saw her name on the on the real January 18 ones.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, which ones are we doing first?
We're taking them both as a package. It's on the same agenda item.
On the January 18th
yes, adding January 18th, adding Alana Aubrey as present.
She is present. I do have her as present on mine.
So maybe because it was missed, the February 27th minutes were mistitled. Maybe that was the confusion.
Oh, she must have read the wrong set. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So she is present on the January 18th minutes. Yes. Okay. That's
good. We're good to go.
And was there another set that she said something about?
No.
Okay. Sorry for the confusion on the, on the second set. I didn't send them together. I sent them, immediately, shortly after the meetings. That probably would have reduced if they had gotten there. Anyway, never mind.
It probably would have reduced
the confusion. Okay.
Any other items for that? Any other questions or pieces that you want to see amended? All right. Do I have a motion to approve both sets of minutes from January 18th and February 27th?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. Okay. Nathan Chung?
Yes.
Oh, Helene Busby, you are here. Sorry, I didn't see your thing. Helene Busby?
Yes.
Trying to figure out this is in order. Michael Falsetti. Maribel Ortiz.
Yes.
Mary Moriarty.
Yes.
Meg McGrath Smith. Yes. Anyone else I'm missing?
Okay, so is Christopher Gauthier will he be voting this evening or?
No, because he's not an official member yet, but he is here representing the Historic Commission. And we also have Beth Goslin, who's representing the Fairfield Local Historic District. And we also have Bob McCarroll here, who's representing the Springfield CPA. So thank you to everyone who is joining us today. I'm super pumped about our next discussion. And let's move to that. So number 2 is discussion of historic home restoration grants program for homeowners. Thank you, Bob, for joining us on video, or not video, on audio, so we can hear you. And I named this as just an initial exploration of developing a similar program for Holyoke. Years ago, we talked as a committee about this idea of a program, but it felt really hard when the only other community in our state that was doing this kind of work was Cambridge. And so the pushback was, look, Cambridge is Cambridge, right? They're very wealthy. Their CPA budget is millions and millions of dollars. And they have 4 historic, commission staffer, full-time paid. We're not Cambridge. And that was sort of how it went. And so I read the room. It's like, okay. But Springfield, who is our just a neighboring city, has now stepped up and has said, no, actually, we think we can do it in a smaller scale, in a slightly different way that matches our community. So I wanted to have Bob come and share his experience with why they created this program, how it operates, then any advice he has for us as we're considering creating our own. And then we have to have a discussion here. I sent you documents from both Cambridge and the Springfield home restoration grants programs, so you can see how they've set them up, and they're both a little different. What we set up will have to be different, right? It will need to match what our needs are and how our community is structured. So I'm really grateful for everyone who came to participate in that conversation today, so we can start this process of considering this for our CPA. Bob, welcome. Do you want to start by just unmuting and just giving us an overview, and then afterwards, hopefully we'll have time for questions and answers.
Sure. I mean, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yep.
I can. Yep.
Oh, okay, great. Because I'm not tech savvy, so sometimes I hit the wrong button and I mute myself, and I don't even know how to unmute it. So I'm the chair of the Springfield Community Preservation Committee, and Springfield and Holyoke adopted CPA the same year, back in 2016. About 3 years ago, our Office of Planning and Economic Development submitted to us for consideration a trial program in our McKnight Historic District. Springfield has a whole bunch of local historic districts. Some of them, though, are single building districts and are not residential, but we have 7 local historic districts that are primarily residential. McKnight is the second largest with about 400 houses, and some of them are in really good shape and some of them need work. And the Planning and Economic Development Department suggested a program that would deal with painting the exterior, repairing original wood windows, and installing energy efficient storm windows. And I think they approached it that way because they staff the Historical Commission, and what the Springfield Historical Commission is overwhelmed with, if you look at their agendas, is requests for replacement windows. So they felt there might be something that would be an alternative to homeowners as opposed to simply ripping out what they got and installing new ones. And the Community Preservation Committee was interested in recommending it. We felt, however, there should be income restrictions because we thought it would be kind of awkward if some of our residents who live in local historic districts that are quite wealthy were getting grants equal to what a low-income family that lives in our historic districts get. So there was an income guideline put on it. The Office of Planning ran that program for a year, and it was quite generous. It gave up to, I think, $30,000 per house, depending on the need of the house and the income of the homeowner. And they then decided that they really didn't want to run this program. They were a planning department. They were an economic development agency. They were not housing specialists. And so the Community Preservation Committee decided that we were going to recommend ourselves to City Council to run the program. And that has indeed occurred. We expanded the programs to all of the local historic districts, not just McKnight. And we've expanded it first so that porch repair would be an eligible activity. And most recently, we expanded it to roof repairs. Given the amount of money that has been allocated, and the amount has been between $200,000 and $250,000 each funding cycle, that can help anywhere from 8 to 12 houses, depending on how much of the grant maximum if they need the grant maximum or not. Our staff person is the person who works with that, but we also have a contractual arrangement with Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, because obviously we need to make sure that the proposed work meets the Secretary of the Interior standards. And we work with a housing specialist in our Office of Housing who writes let's call it the general specs, which are then reviewed by the preservation planner, and that's what the homeowner works with. Ours is a reimbursement program, so you do the work, we inspect it, you give us canceled checks and receipted bills, we authorize a reimbursement pay process, and we're flexible in terms of we will do partial payments, but it's always the homeowner has to do the work first. We have to make sure the work is properly done. So I guess that's sort of an overview. I would say it is more time consuming than we had thought. So make sure whoever you've got running the program at your end has that time that to help work with homeowners who sometimes need a lot of hand holding.
And you said that this is done by lottery, yes? So folks submit the one pager, and then wasn't it like 200 houses were in the lottery this year? And then
Oh, correct.
they sort
Yes.
of drew them, and then as you know, once they found 8 houses that were eligible, those were the ones that got funding.
Correct. It was by lottery. I'm not sure whether I personally would have chosen that, but that's what the Office of Planning and Economic Development chose. And then when we took over the program, we chose to continue it as they ran it. You know, I guess if I had my druthers, I would do it by the need of the house, but we're not doing that. So it is a lottery, and we start working with the first 8 people. We've had instances where the most recent lottery, it was a house that was up for sale, and the owner decided that now they weren't going to participate because they were obviously hoping to sell the house sooner than it would take to participate in the grant program. So sometimes people voluntarily drop out. Sometimes you may find that they don't need the full amount and there's money, and so you go on to the next person who was drawn in the lottery.
I remember you also said that there was an issue with 1 or 2 houses where there had been an issue afterwards with ownership of the house, where you had started to move forward with it, but then there had been like the death of an owner, and suddenly the house is in limbo legally. That was one thing I was thinking about in terms of contracts. It would be important to think about those details to make sure that funding doesn't sort of get stuck along the way.
Correct. Yes. When the Office of Planning and Economic Development was running the first year of the program, 2 of the 8 owners died. And so now they are either in the estate or in a new owner. And, you know, I'm not injecting myself in that because the contract is with the Office of Planning and Economic Development and the owner. So they're consulting with the law department of the city to figure out how do you handle that when the grantee is no longer with us.
Any other questions from the committee? This is a really new topic. I've been thinking about it for a while, but I think for many of you, this is the very first time you've thought about it. So there's no question that's a bad question, as we're just airing out ideas and getting some thoughts out in terms of what we would imagine this program might look like for us. I'm just going to take really good notes as I can think about, like, what might this draft look like? Mary, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. One, you take the funding out of your historic fund, you know, things that were going to be under historic preservation. So do you designate a portion for this type of application, and then you still are able to do historic preservation, you know, for other applicants? So do you break up what you have, you know, by percentage or something?
Well, it's not by a percentage, but clearly we do 3 or 4 other historic applicants each funding cycle, and they're fairly big. So, for example, we have a closed, deteriorated school that was being renovated into housing. We have the Springfield museums, which are in a historic district, that we've helped with a variety of exterior work. We have a drama studio that's in a former church that is a historic building that we've helped. So it's not that our funding goes there. Now, I would say that Springfield raises at this point about $2.5 million a year out of CPA, $200,000 from the local surcharge, and then another $500,000 come from the Commonwealth. I've seen the notices from DOR saying, well, we may not be as generous this coming year, so we could find that we have less money. But we put ours in, as a project, just like we would consider applications coming from anyone. And I'm not sure how Holyoke does it. We have an annual funding cycle where people submit to us CPA proposals, and we usually get in the high 20s, and they're asking for twice as much money as we have to recommend to the city council, and we usually end up recommending about 15 of the 27 or 28 projects. And our own historic preservation program has been one of those 15 projects that we've recommended to city council.
Mm-hmm. We had a question from our staffer Amy Lundell wanted to know if the Springfield CPA requires a preservation restriction along with the funding to these individual homeowners.
So because we only give the money to houses within a designated local historic district, as far as we're concerned, there's already exterior protection, because the chances of city council coming along and abolishing the McKnight Local Historic District or the Forest Park Heights Historic District is slim to none. What we do have, and this is an aside, there are times that we help buildings that the Historical Commission has determined to be significant to the community for architectural or historic reasons, and it is not on the state register. And therefore, when we give money, like to the drama studio that occupies an early 20th century closed Episcopal church, our money comes with the restriction that says you will petition the city council to become a single building local historic district to protect your outside. And failing that, if city council for whatever reason doesn't pass it, you will give us an exterior preservation restriction, and that's built into the contract. But since our historic homeowners are already in a designated historic district, we don't worry about that. Obviously, what we say to them is, we're giving you money. Now you need to come up with a certificate from the local historical commission telling us that your porch work has been approved by them, or your roof work has been approved by them. And even if it's a paint job and historical commission doesn't control the color of paint here in Springfield, you still need to give us a certificate of non-applicability.
Okay. Right.
And let me just add this. One of the reasons why we started the program is because the property owners in the historic district, when they have issues, just can't be traipsing off to Home Depot and buying, these tall, elongated porch spindles, or automatically going out and installing replacement windows, because those are not things that the local historical commission wants to see in its local historic districts. So our feeling was that owners in a local historic district have a higher maintenance responsibility than folks that aren't in it.
Right. Nathan, I see your hand up.
Get a robbery. Yes, thank you for coming to speak to us. I was wondering, so did you say you hand off the admin work to PVVC?
Um, the the we have an arrangement with the preservation planner at PVPC to review the specifications of all of our historic properties to make sure the work complies with the Secretary of the Interior standards. So whether it's the Historic Homes Program or the money that we gave to the museums to fix the outside of the George Walter Vincent Smith Art Museum, or whether we gave it to the drama studio to fix up a historic church, anyone that's a historic resource has to have the work program reviewed, and we have an arrangement with Pioneer Valley Planning Commission to do that.
And I'm guessing, some of the budget goes toward that. It's not like they do it for free, right? Would they be, would PVVC
Well,
expense be?
yes,
Yeah.
yes, and no. So I was telling Megan that, as far as I know, and I'm hoping I'm repeating this correctly, the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission provides its members community, all of its member communities, with up to 15 hours of free consultant services every year. So every year, we, the Community Preservation Committee, vote to ask PVPC for 15 free hours, and then we have a budget to pay them when they go past the 15 hours. So yeah, it does cost, but if you ask for it and you ask for it early enough, because I guess other communities are asking for this free service, not necessarily just in the historic area, but in all of the various areas that PVPC has for assistance. And what we do is the administration of this program comes out of our general admin money. It does not come out of the money that's allocated for the Historic Homes Program. Because obviously we do have to pay our administrator more because she's giving us more time helping to run this program as well. And when we have the contract with PVPC to actually do beyond the 15 hours worth of work, we have to pay them. And that comes out of our own, the 5% you can allocate yourself with the permission of City Council for admin.
Right, thank you. Yeah, that was my question, I guess. Whether it comes out of admin, that was my guess. I think one comment I want to make is I have very brief experience. I was the CDB's admin for Northampton for about a year, and we have a housing rehab program, not a historic, restoration program, but individual homeowner rehab program. And the thing always that comes up is administrative. It is a pretty heavy burden. So we subcontracted out to Community Action Pioneer Valley, and we used to do it with PVVC. I think just my impression was that because Holyoke has a much smaller budget for CPA and hence a much smaller admin budget, um, the administrative burden, depending on how popular this kind of program is, especially if it's a lot of smaller homeowners in historical districts. So many smaller projects that are asking for micro funds or relatively small funds, it might actually be administratively prohibitive. That's been sort of my personal experience. Like it's almost counterintuitive, but smaller projects that are many smaller projects are more expensive in a sense than many high budget project that's and I'm sorry, forgive me, a few number of very high budget projects. So that's just something on my mind as I heard your presentation.
That's true of historic projects in general. They tend to be lower and really finicky in terms of needing preservation restrictions, needing support to go, in terms of the process of having to go through a historic commission, right? Our historic projects definitely have some of the largest burden in terms of supporting them. And one thing that we should think about is, Springfield decided to allocate a certain number of funds, and then it's a number of houses up until those funds are expended. The program can be established a number of different ways. It could be that it's just a number of houses, right? It could be X number of funds, but only up to 4 houses, or, we can decide how we would want to structure it if we end up moving forward. And also, I mean, it sounds, very, the way that they've structured the program, it's fairly generous, right? It's up to $30,000 for an award. And that is really dependent on AMI. Did anyone else look at the chart that showed how they used AMI in order to calculate it? So if you were
What is AMI?
Area
area
median
median
income.
income.
Oh, sorry.
So Bob, I don't know if you would mind talking about that in terms of how you structure the award up to a certain amount based on AMI.
Yeah, well, it was more or less done by our vice chair, who was the committee member that was most adamant that there needed to be income limits because he didn't feel that upper income people should be getting the same degree of grant as lower income people. So he's the one that crafted it. What we have is our gradation goes up to 200% of AMI. So let me just give you an example. I think, and please don't hold me to this number, but AMI for a single person household is about 65,000. So 200% of AMI would allow a single person household up to 130,000. Now at 130,000, they might, beyond that you don't get anything beyond, but 125,000 might get only a 5% of $30,000 grant. So they might get only 1,500 regarding the size of the project they were doing. Someone who's under 60% AMI, which is low income, could get the full 30,000. And so there's a whole sweep of gradation between those two. Now, that's how we chose to do it. Clearly, you could choose that historic projects do not carry household income limits, so you could decide you're not even going to deal with AMI. You could decide you're simply going to give a set grant amount. We're giving up to 10,000 for a project to who's ever an eligible owner occupant. The other thing that we did is, and I'm not sure whether Fairfield Avenue has, let's call it infill buildings, but in our local historic districts, we've got buildings that were built in the 1960s and the 1950s before the historic districts were created. And the intent was, this program is not there to help them, it's there to help the period buildings that give the district its character. So we put on a requirement that besides being an owner occupant in the district, the house had to be built before, I think, 1940.
It would help if I was unmuted. This is the chart from HUD that shows, 50% AMI for our area versus 80% AMI for our area for 1, 2, 3, 4 people, etc. So that gives you a sense of what we're talking about. Yeah. Nathan, and then was that you, Mary?
No, I just was saying I can't read it so small, but that's all right. I figure out how to enlarge it.
When I zoomed in, did you see it?
Oh, good. Much better. Much better. Thank you.
You got it. Nathan, your hand was up.
That might be outdated. My understanding,
okay.
The current year for the current up-to-date figure for 4 family, 4 people in the household, the AMI, 80% of the AMI is 75,300, so it's a little bit higher.
So maybe this is last year's that I pulled.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean, and
but it gives you a sense of it in terms of if we decide to create something that's fairly progressive and takes AMI into account, this is what it might look like.
Right. I mean, one thing, it may be not feasible, but I mean, this is sort of most community development departments' bread and butter. They, like I think Holyoke, their community development department with Elijah Zoller, our community development department, we fund um, what is it, Holyoke One or One Holyoke CDC with their neighborhood improvement program, which is actually, from my understanding, that's the CDBG home rehab program. So they're already kind of familiar with the process, although their beneficiaries are limited to 80% of AMI or less, not like the 200% gradation Springfield is using for the historical CPA projects. So, I mean, it might be necessary to kind of reinvent the process, or maybe there's a way to not reinvent the wheel and somehow, use their system or merge with them. But yeah, yes, CDBG, federal CDBG funding, they have a housing program, rehab program as one of the possible programs you can utilize, but the beneficiaries are limited to 80% usually of the area's median income. So it's not as all encompassing.
Right. Christopher Gothier from the Historic Commission, and then Helene.
Just wanted to know a little bit more on how you actually came to the lottery decision. What other options were maybe spoken about or researched?
So the initial proposal that came in from the Office of Planning and Economic Development, and they decided that they wanted a lottery. They did not want to get into, let's call it, grading and ranking applications regarding need. And, we were, let me speak for myself. I was thrilled that there was a proposal. I had worked for the city in the planning department for 30 years between 1972 and 2002 when I retired. And in the late 70s and 80s and early 90s, there was a CDBG program that helped homeowners in historic districts to a small degree. And then that that program ended. So the city had been without anything to help historic homeowners for 25 years. So I didn't really want to micromanage this program in terms of telling them what to do. And so that's what they asked for a lottery, and we said, fine. We simply asked that there be income limits because we didn't want to have publicity coming out that people who, were extremely well-paid individuals were getting sizable grants.
I wonder too about the power of a lottery and that it just feels fair to the community, right? Everyone who wants to put their house in the hat gets to put it in the hat, and we're not picking favorites. We're picking out of the hat. And maybe someone's house is more historically significant than another, but we've said that this is the way that we're going to do it to make it fair. I think that there's something about that when you're dispersing taxpayer funding. It's going to be really important.
In the 2 years that we've run the lottery, there's actually an online resource where our administrator enters all of the applicants, and in the press of one button, they're randomized and ordered from 1 to 200, and that's how many applicants we had. So it's certainly I'm going to call it a dispassionate way of selecting who you're going to be working with. Doesn't necessarily have you work with the properties that are in the most need.
Mm-hmm. Right. So you're suggesting that another way of considering it is sort of ranking properties in some way based on need. I will say the other efficiency aspect of the lottery is that it decreases the amount of research that has to get done, because you only research the houses that you pull. So even if there are 200, homes in the lottery, you only then have to do research on, up to that number of houses that you've picked.
Absolutely, because one of the things that the Office of Planning and Economic Development didn't like is they vetted everyone income-wise before they put them into the lottery. And our attitude is what you just said, Megan. We're only going to worry about vetting the people who get chosen. Now, it may mean that there are people who win the lottery, and when we actually contact them and they fill out all of their paperwork, we say to them, sorry, you're over income, or you can only get $1,000 from us. Sorry. But we decided that there's less work for us to vet, let's call it the lottery winners, as opposed to the lottery entrants.
Right. Helene Busby.
Hi, thanks. So I was really actually going to just point out, which Nathan did, that in terms of the AMI, it sounds like Springfield is doing 200%. So just that the numbers would be much higher, and that there are other programs, it sounds like they do a lower amount. And then just, I mean, with the Fairfield Historical District, and I'm not as savvy about whether this would apply to many others, but that's like a very clear example of a place with a lot of historic homes. It also, I mean, it is definitely an area that has, some of the highest home prices, and where there's definitely like a lot of equity, I think, has been for folks who've been there. Like the homes are definitely worth more now than probably ever before. And so that's just something to think about. I don't think that includes apps like everyone who lives in that neighborhood, and that there are many people that might fit this. But I think especially if we're doing historic districts and that's how it's going to be done, it is really important to have some kind of income limit, because it does seem to be favoring kind of what would seem to me to be like probably the most affluent neighborhood in the city. So I just wanted to kind of, that's kind of the takeaway I'm hearing from this, is just something to kind of think about.
Yeah, one of my questions is, Springfield does a up to 200% AMI. We could easily not do that, right? We could say we're going to just have 100% AMI, right? Like we can decide that as a committee. The other piece that's interesting to consider is, yes, Springfield is doing it through local historic districts, but they have many districts. That looks different here. So I do think that we have to consider, is that a structure that we would want to replicate here or not, right? It would create a different level of burden on us to expand it, because then we have to deal with things like preservation restrictions or figuring out that end of it. But it would probably increase addressing the equity issues of it. I'm also wondering if the Hadley Falls Housing District would naturally fall under this if we did stick just with local districts. But I don't know if they are considered a local housing district. They're a historic district. Are they? Chris, you're nodding your head. And again, I also think you have to think about sometimes it's starting somewhere, right? I think we could start with these two districts, and we're doing it as a pilot for 1 year, and then we're going to learn how the process goes, see if it feels tenable, and go from there. Or from the very beginning, we could say, no, we're going to open it up to houses across the city. If your house is over 100 years old, throw your name in the ring. As we would just need to know that it would take more hours on the back end for us. It would be a more expensive program to run on our end, because then we'd have to do research, and it would become more onerous because they're not already pre-vetted effectively by being in local historic districts. So then we would have to do that work somehow, either Amy doing the work, or us picking up hours from Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, or some other structure, some other mechanism. I did talk to Yep, go ahead, Bob.
So the one thing is, CPA, the overarching CPA law says if you're doing it under historic, it has to be a resource that is either on the state register of historic places, and all local historic districts are automatically on the state register. All national register districts are already on the state register. But if you're not in one of those, then you have to go to option B, which is a determination by your local historical group that the building has importance for history, architecture, archaeology, or culture for Holyoke. So I guess what I would just say beware of, you could have a house that's 100 years old and the porch was ripped off in the 1950s and the house is now vinyl sided, but it's 100 years old. And then you're going to be saying to that owner, well, you got to go to the historical commission, and the historical commission has to determine that your property is important to the city of Holyoke because of those reasons. So just be aware of that. In order to help someone who's not on the state register, your historical commission has to determine that the property's important to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Any other questions or thoughts? Okay, I think this raised some really interesting ideas for us, and I think what I would like to do from here is I've taken a lot of notes. We'll continue to reach out to stakeholders to get some thoughts about potentially moving forward, and then try to come up with a draft. I don't know if that'll be by the next meeting or the one after that, but create a draft proposal with some specifics, and then we can talk about it and we can discuss it. We can amend things. We can vote on it. Right. And there's no saying that we'll necessarily move forward at all. It's something to explore and see what we think. It's something that we could move forward with this year. It could be this is our research year and we're talking about it and trying to figure out what the right mechanisms and structures and income levels and all of that is for us, what houses are going to be considered in what districts or beyond. And then maybe we launch it next year. Right. So I think we have a lot of options, but I think it's something that we should start talking about. We have a lot of historic homes in our city, and it really runs the gamut of our city in every ward. And I remember even years ago, folks who remember Rosemary Arnold was our vice chair for several years. One of her arguments was that we had a lot of historic barns, and that folks are just taking them down because they can't afford to repair them. So I think this is something that really could cross the city in a lot of different wards, in a lot of different ways. But again, it comes with that back end of property has to be on the state register, which creates some legwork. Maybe there are some community partners like Holyoke Preservation Trust, right? The Historic Commission, Pioneer Valley Planning Commission that can support us with that. I think without those partnerships, it will have too much of a burden on the committee and on our capacity to pay for it and to do it within the hours that Amy can do and what we're paying her to do. Okay. Bob McCarroll, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate just the grace of you being willing to come and share with you the work that Springfield is doing and help us think about this. I'm much appreciative.
Well, happy to be here. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out at any time. All right. Have a good evening, everyone. Yep.
Thank you.
Bye.
You too.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Before we move to agenda item 3 or 4, 3. Yes. Is there anything else that anyone wants to say before we move from this topic? Okay. Thank you. I know some folks just came to kind of listen to this part, and if you want to zoom out at this point, that's great. Thank you so much for joining us and listening. Much appreciated. All right, we're going to move to item 3, which is just a quick update. So the CPA ballot question, I presented to finance after our last meeting, and I presented what I shared with you, which is the effect that it would have to reduce the CPA surcharge from 1.5 to 0.5. And so you know what I want to do? I want to really quickly show one slide really quick, just because I know that not everybody has seen it. I don't want to refer to it if everyone hasn't seen it. So what I shared was this, and I shared, here is what we have expended over the last 4 funding cycles. And then here is what admin costs have been every year. And you can see that over time, there's been a lot of fluctuation. Our first year, it was very low because it was our first year. And I think a lot of that was the preservation plan that they did as they were launching. And then we had to hire a full-time staffer and actually start working with applicants. And that takes a lot of time, right? A lot of what Amy does is on the front end and the back end. So it's working with folks who have questions. It's guiding them along the way. People have a lot of questions, things they're not sure how to do. She's working with them on that. And then on the back end, she's doing invoicing. She's doing all of the stuff she has to do to pay folks and move things through properly and documenting it. So I named a finance, like here's what our admin budget pays for, right? We have our CPA administrator. We have a financial consultant that we hired to help us really get our financial house in order that we're going to continue working with. We pay for website design and support. We pay for newspaper notices that are required legally whenever we have our public hearings. We pay CPA coalition dues so that we can go to them for advice every time we have questions on how CPA works or what's eligible. We also pay for supplies, technology, like all of Amy's laptops, that sort of thing, and services like SignNow, which is how we do our electronic contracts. And Zoom is something that's gone back and forth in terms of, I think in the future, we may also be asked to pay for that, but so far we have not. So there's a number of services as well that we're paying for with that admin budget. So last year we spent, a little bit over $33,000 with all of that, just administering the program. It's also gotten more complicated over time because it's not like these projects, as we've learned, often start and end in one fiscal year. So at this point, how many projects are we actively tracking? It's over a dozen at this point who are still finishing, right? Who sometimes take 3 or 4 or 5 or more cycles to be complete and to draw down their entire award. So then I presented just a snapshot so that they would understand one of the main issues when you decrease the surcharge from 1.5 to 0.5 is that when your overall budget goes down by that amount, it really shifts how much you can pay in any disperse in any individual category. And then the general fund, right, is sort of like how you would put it together. So in order to do any given project, you'd have to wait a few years to have enough funding in that category to be able to spend larger amounts on projects. And administrative costs, I think, is actually the biggest issue. So right now we could spend up to $40,000 on admin. Anything that's extra gets rolled over. But if we are limited legally to that 5% and we can only spend $13,000 on admin, who's picking up the cost of running this program? Then the city does, right? So then they have to develop the contracts. They have to find someone who could do the accounting for us. Like they would have to, kind of absorb all of these costs, which may feel indirect, but it's still labor that's going to be tasked out. That's going to end up being, dollars and cents to the taxpayer in terms of hours worked, or extra staffers who end up having to be, hired in other departments who are now absorbing work. So that was, something I presented to finance, and based on that, when they presented it to city council, or rather in that conversation, they decided that they didn't want to recommend that it be reduced to 0.5. They wanted to recommend that it would be reduced by no more than to 1%. So that is what's moving to city council tomorrow. So it's laid on the table, which means that it's laid on the table for a vote, for discussion and a vote. So I wanted to thank Nathan for presenting in public comment earlier this month. And I think that I'm encouraging anyone else to call your city councilors and to speak in public comment, or to be a force for good for CPA. Because I think that there's a lot of city councilors who feel like a lot of pressure, right? This has been a year of inflation. It's been a year of them voting to increase sewer rate and also the property rate. with house values going up, meant that people on average are spending $200 more on property tax and also more on sewer. So I think there's a lot of city councils that are like, okay, well, how can we give something back to the voter? And they're like, well, I don't know, CPA. That could be the thing that we give back to voters to tell them that we care. The problem, of course, is the average CPA voter is average single family home is going to save $12.76 if you reduce the CPA surcharge by 0.5%, but they don't know that. Or they just want to kind of stick it to the man and be like, yeah, my taxes are high and I am struggling with costs and I do want things to be lowered. And I want to communicate that to you by voting for this. So I want you to understand that I'm struggling and I want things to be lowered, but the effect will be on the CPA. So it's just for folks to understand, like, this is real. And I totally understand why it's happening, but I think it's, it's like cutting off our noses to spite our face. And it's a really good program for the city and a city that really needs investment. Amy, you had your hand up.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to mention that I participate in a monthly CPA peer networking meeting with other CPA communities. And we talked about this issue because there's another community, New Bedford, and their city council wants to put a question about revoking their CPA. And she, this CPA staff person was really encouraging us to, that mentioning how much money gets leveraged for the city through the CPA, local CPA match is really huge, a very important point, and just breaking that down with the percentages and showing. And I know that we did do that. I asked, grantees to put the amount that they leveraged in an Excel sheet, which we have. But also she said that you can reach out to the different projects that received funds, the grantees, and tell them to get their supporters of their projects to speak out. So these are all things that could be considered.
Yeah, Amy, that's a good idea. And you could, of course, email out to the recipients and encourage them to, here's the city councilors that you can reach out to. Yes, of course, I believe in public comment and I believe in attending meetings, but I think it's also really helpful just to pick up the phone and call someone and leave a voicemail or send a quick email. I think sometimes those communications resonate more because they're feeling the weight of, wow, a number of people are reaching out to me about this topic, because they are hearing from homeowners who are saying, I feel stressed, I feel squeezed, right? They are hearing from homeowners about that. And I think they also need to hear the other side, which is, there may be other ways to do that than CPA, right? Which leverages a lot of funding and comes with a state match. So anything also that we reduce means that we'll get less of a state match. Yes, Helene?
Hey, I just wanted to clarify, and if you said this and it just went through my head, but just to clarify, the vote tomorrow is about whether it's going to be on the ballot.
Yes.
Correct. Okay.
So,
not about changing it. Okay. That's what I understood. I just wanted to clarify that I understood that was the next step.
yeah. So if they vote yes tomorrow, then it goes on the ballot, and then voters in November will vote for whether or not they want to reduce the surcharge from 1.5
to 1%. To 1%. Yeah. Okay. So
I guess that actually means, because they changed it, it's not the average homeowner for a single family home would be saving $24 a year.
Okay.
Yeah, because it was $12.76 when they were trying to reduce it all the way down to 0.5%. But still.
Yeah.
Right. And that's your average family, which means that a lot of people are paying less.
Right.
Right. And some people are paying more, don't get me wrong. But also, I don't know. I'm that person where I'm like, well, if you're paying a little more, maybe that also means that you're making more. Right. Or maybe it means that you own a property that has more value.
Yeah. So I guess the other piece I wanted to say, and just because, and, I think just as like a way to kind of think about things and talk to people about it. And I totally hear what Megan, you're saying, and just reframing, because I think you probably agree with this, that the other issue is that, many people who support the CPA are homeowners. Like, many people, you know, and that there's sort of this sense of like homeowners are this sort of monolith in the city who are just like,
Yeah.
have no voice and are, you know, and that's not true. Like, I'm a homeowner and I really think this is an amazing program and a lot of other people do. So to sort of say, well, some homeowners may not approve, but there's a lot that do. So just to kind of not concede ground in that way. Which,
Yeah, no, I appreciate that reframing.
yeah. But thank you for the information, and it gives me something to do for tomorrow, which, you know,
Like you don't have enough to do.
I don't know what to do.
Mary,
Well, I have tomorrow. I have a parks meeting, so I can't be there, but I can reach out to my rep, my counselor.
Yes, Mary.
Okay, so so tomorrow night they're going to vote whether to put the specific question on the ballot. So we would want to go in and look and see what the question says. And then it's, we think that it's going to say to reduce the CPA funding to 1%. Do we know what effect that would have on our, you know, administrative costs? And also, is there a possibility, how many do they have to vote yes in order for it to be on the ballot? I think it's 9 out of 13, isn't it? What's the number that have to vote yes to put it on the ballot? Does it seem like there's any appetite to say no to that?
I think it will really depend on who reaches out. I do. And I also think that it's, you know, a number of city councilors believe, hey, why not give it to the voters and give them voice and make them feel happy that they have that opportunity to vote, you know, yes or no. That's something that I've heard a number of times in different meetings. And I think the hard part about that is taxes in our country are wildly unpopular. Right? It takes a lot of effort to mount asking for more money from people. The original campaign to get CPA in the city took a lot of blood, sweat, and tears from the hardworking volunteers, you know, who worked hard to make this happen. So, you know, but that's okay. And if it goes on the ballot, then the community too can get the word out and can push for CPA to be supported at the ballot too.
And do we know how much of an effect the 1% would be? It was described at one city councilor said something about it's only a third. That's not exactly how it would be anyway, right?
It would decrease the admin budget by a third.
Oh, it would decrease the admin budget by a third. You think that?
Yeah. Which is problematic.
Okay, yep.
Nathan, you have your hand up?
Thank you, Megan. Chair. One thing I want to warn people is I'm not clear about when it says laid on the table, that might be like a state legislative euphemism for postponement. Because what happened on the last 2 weeks ago, the city council meeting, they had a bunch of things, or there are a few things that were laid on the table, other items, and they never actually addressed them. And I looked it up and it seems like it's a euphemism. Not saying that's the case, I'm not clear, but based on how they set things up in the past, there is a chance that if you go to the meeting tomorrow, you know, the CPA question is one of the things laid on the table. So maybe it might not get addressed. I'm not clear right now how they function. And
I'm messaging Israel Rivera now as our person to ask if he can pop in or if he can answer that question.
Right.
It's a good question. And I'll tell you, there is so much to be learned about the mechanisms of how this all works. And, you know, a cynical person might remark the complexity of it makes it really hard for citizens to know how and when to respond.
I mean, I think you have a reason to be cynical. A lot of it is, I think, intentional or unintentional, but sort of meant to confound people and sort of make things opaque. But anyways, that's an irrelevant rant. One thing I want to add before I stop talking is, I mean, you know, one thing that worried me about this whole, so, you know, to be honest, I'm more for like, you know, I'm a bias more for, I like, you know, tax cuts sometimes. I like sometimes smaller, simpler government structures. But the thing with this particular proposal that bugged me was that they kept talking about how this is an attempt to save taxpayer money, but they never actually talked about the specific like tax impact. How much are we actually saving? So I did a little math there. I downloaded the state tax table, which has all the property tax owners listed, and I was only looking at 8,500 residential property owners, not just single family, but 8,500 residential property owners as a whole. And the way it's work is the way the tax code is gonna work. So I'm looking at the 8,500, residential properties. There's about the bottom 90%, the maximum value is $290,000. So the among the bottom 90%, 90%, the highest property value is about $293,000. And when you reduce it by, 0.5%, you're saving about 18 bucks, So it's like, 18 bucks you're saving, if you reduce it, and like 15% of all the properties in Holyoke, they don't already pay anything because of the 100K with a 100K exemption. So it's like, why are they targeting a specific program that has a good benefit? I mean, why can't they make it a general tax rate reduction if they really want people to save $18, I mean, anyways, sorry for the rant. I don't want to take too much time, so thank you. I'll stop talking.
Well, it looks different for commercial properties that have more value. So the
Right.
mall is the highest paying person in terms of CPA or entity, and they paid $76,000 this year. So, the top 10 commercial properties, of course, their value of their property means that they are paying much greater CPA surcharge than your average single family homeowner. So, yeah, it's a little bit, I think disingenuous is, not a fair word, but in terms of who this saves money, it's way less the individual, like kind of average homeowner, and it's way more either maybe commercial properties or folks whose home value is way above the median for the city, or way above the 90%, right, or lower for the city. Okay. Any final thoughts on this before we move to? Oh, Israel Rivera is here. Yes. Okay. Izzy, what does late on the table mean? Does that mean they're going to address the ballot question tomorrow? Or is that a euphemism for we're tabling it and not addressing it yet?
I think they're tabling it and not addressing it yet, but I could be wrong. But that's, I think, because I asked the same exact question that day, like, what do you mean laid on the table? And what I heard is that they're possibly tabling it because I think we're waiting on some language or something, or waiting on some.
Oh, so legal hasn't, so that's what happened last meeting, is they said they were going to tackle it and then they tabled it because legal hadn't given them the language for the ballot question. Because the language that's in right now is very leading. It names all of the increases in different costs for homeowners across the city in the language, and then asks people if they want to decrease CPA. And so thankfully, a number of city councilors, like Joe McGriven, pushed really hard for it needs to be a clean ballot question. It can't lead people into voting a certain way. So I know they had asked legal for what is language that really feels clean and unbiased. So maybe legal hasn't responded yet.
Waiting for now with regards to the it being laid on the table. So once all that stuff is figured out, then we'll address. I guess for me,
if legal submits the language tomorrow, will it suddenly be taken off the table and potentially voted on?
Could be, but I don't. Legal submitted the language. If it's not in there, it would be as an attachment or a lay file.
Okay.
And I think it might have to go back to ordinance with the new language for us to vote on it to then.
Yeah, I don't know if it would go to charter and rules or if it would go to finance.
No,
both have looked at it.
It would, yeah. They haven't looked at the new language yet, and they haven't met around the new language that was created.
So you think it will have to be moved to subcommittee first and then pushed back to the city council?
It's possible, but it is also possible that we could take it up right there and just have the vote with the new language, because that's all we were like. It depends on how they want to approach it. If someone wants to procrastinate and add another step in it, that's what we could do. If someone wants to push something through, we could take it off the table right there and just do it like that. It all depends on the approach of who's trying to do what they want to do with regards to playing the game. I mean, that's what I'm learning right now. So like,
Only my cynicism is only increasing.
so like, when I was arguing for it, I mean, luckily Joe's on the side, right? Because if not, then it would sound like I'm a member and I'm just trying to defend it because I'm on the CPA. You know what I mean? But the fact that he's not a counselor that's on it, it provides a different perspective. And he's another long-standing member that a lot of the other people listen to.
Mhm.
So when he speaks against Jourdain, it gives it more, I would say, clout. So, like you said, he advocated for it to have straight language, but I tried to make it so that there's an opportunity to increase the pricing too, right? Because they're saying for it to be equitable and to be fair, that we have to put language in it that makes it fair across the board. But how would it be fair if you're only talking about bringing the price down? You're not talking about bringing it up either. But they didn't want to jump on that.
Yeah.
Just saying. But yeah, I think
I
it's
appreciate you go there. You're like, let's just raise it. Let's put that in.
Well,
I
that's what I'm
appreciate
saying. That way you give options to the people when they select. Because there might be some people that say they want it to go up. You don't know that.
Right. It's true. Okay. Well, thank you for chiming in. We weren't sure what that meant. It sounds like there's still some.
Yeah, we still got to
what
get
they're
back from
gonna
legal.
do.
Wait. We got one question we forgot to ask Councilor Rivera.
Oh yeah.
Is
Go
it
ahead.
how many votes? Is it a super majority or is it just a simple majority?
I think it would be 8-4.
A4. Okay. What? Okay.
At least, or I think we need at least 8 votes.
Okay. Okay.
We should be
Well,
fine.
let's.
It's gonna be hard. I don't like if you're asking about the language for the charter thing. I'm gonna vote no, but I'm not gonna explain why. I'm not gonna talk none of that. I don't want to talk in circles. Everybody's gonna do all that. I'm just gonna say no. That's it. And they're gonna say some people are gonna vote yes. It's gonna be that they're gonna want it on the ballot because they want the people to have a choice on whether or not, you know what I mean? It's democratic process. And it's not to say that I don't believe in it, because I do, but I believe that process has already been served.
Mm-hmm.
And now people are just playing games. But I'm different, so it's okay.
Well, I appreciate you.
I appreciate all of you guys, because this is a lot of time and dedication. I was trying to mention that the last meeting, because this takes a lot of time. I actually mentioned to somebody that there should be a stipend attached to this CPA, because people dedicate a lot of time and hours to this, and I really appreciate all the work that gets put into this.
Appreciate you. All right, so we're gonna move to the last agenda item. It's a really quick one. It's just.
Could I?
Oh, yep. Sorry. Yep. Go ahead.
So one question I have is, am I muted?
No, we can hear you.
No.
You can hear me? Okay, sorry. Oh, well, I was going to say that, whatever happens tomorrow, it wouldn't hurt to reach out to people and then next time so that, it's like every time it comes up, they're the pro voices for those who want to have us have a reasonable budget. The other question I have is, how much is this costing with this language? And I'd just be interested how much it's going to cost to put the thing on the ballot after it was really not that long ago that it was voted in. And so just sort of seems like that seems like a waste. There's other elections going on at the same time, I know, but that just would be a question. I don't know how we would find that out, but it's not a, you know, a lot of time and effort is going into something that was sort of already decided fairly recently, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, it was 6 years ago.
Yeah. And then we're going to vote again, and there's language, and it's going back, and the legal department's working on it, and just seems like it's a big use of resources to be doing this. And yeah, that I just think that those are the pieces which have to be highlighted and pushed back on, that if we want to talk about saving taxpayers money, like, this is also costing money to go through this whole thing.
Yeah, and to Amy's point, I'll email out the leverage chart, because when we had asked different applicants, like, how did CPA funding end up supporting you to get even more funding? And like, we were able to get $175,000. We were able to, give $175,000, for example, to the Anniversary Hill acquisition, but then it was matched, right, up to $150,000 by Land and Water Conservation Fund. We would never have gotten that funding without CPA as the match. So there's always this kind of like leveraging sources of, like, you can't get it unless someone in city government is matching. And right now we've been that matching fund. The Wayfinders piece would not have happened. The city and CPA together both gave a significant chunk of funding to get up to the amount of percentage they needed in order to unlock all of this state and federal funding. So there's that too. If you're kind of lowering the surcharge and preventing us from being able to be that kind of first in money, then it's hard for us to then leverage other state and federal monies that we can bring into the city. Izzy, is your hand up?
Yes. I think one of the questions I had, so if we cut, and this is a point I was trying to make, but this guy was trying to, somebody was trying to discredit the point, but if we cut, they pull back 0.5% or whatnot, whatever we get matched from the state is based on how much the taxpayers put in, right?
Say that one more time.
Yes.
So depending on how much money we collect on taxpayers, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's how much there's a certain formula put together by the state on how much they contribute towards us too as well, right?
Yes.
Yeah, right. So the state match is just a percentage of whatever we levy. And that's why some communities voted for 2 or 3%.
So if we cut the percent down, then, because one of the counselors tried to make a point out of saying that that if we cut it, it's only going to cut a certain amount of money. It's like $200,000. But what I was saying was, it's not just $200,000. It also impacts the way we receive money from the state level because of the formula. So it'll be $200,000 plus whatever else we didn't receive because of the new formula.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yes. So if somehow, some way that could be mapped out too, that could just show that we're not only losing money by going down just like a little bit of money, we're losing a significant amount of money because it's a match.
Right. Yeah, and I think if one of the issues, of course, is we don't know. Does it come up tomorrow night? Does it get pushed and it comes up in 2 weeks or 4 weeks, right? You just don't know. So it's hard to kind of amass a citizen response. So I think these are all things that are important, and like I'll share the leveraging data with you, and you're our voice in the room, right? Whenever it does come up, because it's not always clear to citizens when it will. And we go from there. I think that I wish that they understood that there's something irresponsible about asking to, naming on a ballot question, like, we know all of you are really cash strapped. Would you like to save some money by decreasing the surcharge for CPA, without then also naming on the other side, like, here's all the money that we would lose as a city if we did that. So whatever that language looks like, I hope that the language is fair. Okay, I'm gonna move to the last update so we can close the meeting. So updates on past projects, item number 4. an update on MIFA Murals. So I don't know if people have been able to make it to Wistariahurst to see the lunette that's on display with all of the curatorial text they have there. It's quite impressive, and I would encourage everyone, including members of the public, to make their way to Wistariahurst to see it. It is very impressive. Very cool to see what they can do with something that was that faded and that in need of restoration and like bringing it back to life. Makes me really excited about seeing them when they are ready to be installed in all of their glory, when they're massive panels that are what is it 22 feet tall, 13 feet tall. They're huge. And there's two of them. We have talked to MIFA about completing their contract, which is now in draft form. Thank you, Amy. Mike and I talked yesterday to look over the contract, and Amy is just working on a few final details before it gets sent to them to be approved by the recipient, and then we'll sign it and have that executed, which is very exciting. And then once that's executed, we've sort of been in conversations with MIFA around how to make sure that they're highlighting that the CPA contribution is a key part of being able to allow this restoration to take place, and making sure that, you know, our logo and that is sort of named really strategically whenever they are doing press releases or newspaper interviews, or, you know, even in the curatorial text itself. That's something that we are pushing for, because it wasn't front and center in some of the stuff that happened over the last 2 weeks when they were unveiling the lunette. Just to keep you aware of that. And then, Amy, you have 2 updates on Anniversary Hill and Jackson Street Habitat for Humanity.
Sure. Just briefly, I had some communication with Yoni about the Anniversary Hill Scott Tower acquisition, about the permanent signage and whether or not there should be temporary signage. And he pointed out that there would be vandalism if there was a temporary banner. So he said that it would seem to make most sense to just do the permanent signage at the trailhead kiosk like they did before for Glowtech, but to do that once all the site improvements have taken place. So, I mean, it's in the language of each separate contract, but, you know, that related to Anniversary Hill, but it still would work out to, it does make sense to have it, you know, be after those trail improvements were done. So I just wanted to convey that to the committee, that is how he was saying it would make most sense to handle that. And then in terms of 113 and 117 Jackson Street Habitat for Humanity, they did submit the final report for 117 Jackson Street, which I forwarded to you in an Excel sheet form. But there are also a couple of a photo of each of the houses and a financial spreadsheet that she submitted.
Okay, that's all I have. Anything under other? Actually, there is something under other. One thing that we realized is when we went back through our bylaws, when we were looking at the attendance stuff, is we had thought that officers were a 2-year tenure, and it's not. It's a 1-year tenure. So we missed that vote in July. We didn't actually re-vote the officers back in. Myself as chair, Mike Falsetti as vice chair, and Mary Moriarty as secretary. So what I would like to do to remedy that is to discuss having a vote tonight or putting it on the docket for next meeting. And it's a little silly because we are like way into this year, but now that we do know what we know, it makes sense to respond to it. And then of course we would have another vote in July, right? to actually kind of respond to the yearly vote cycle that we should have been on. So I wanted to name that and see what folks thought, if we wanted to vote tonight or if we wanted to name it on the agenda officially and do it next meeting. Yeah, Michael?
Madam Chairman, I say let's do it tonight, put the baby to bed, and just get on with it. It's more of a procedural matter than anything else. Any folks that want to run or whatever you all want to do, but we might as well get it done tonight. Why delay? Since we're kind of behind the 8 ball a little bit in terms of time, I think we just get it done tonight and we'll put that baby to bed.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
I think it makes sense to just do it now, but what worries me is technically, is this on the agenda? If it's not on the agenda, like an important matter like this, well, relatively important matter like this, if it's not on the agenda, I don't think we're supposed to act on it. That's my understanding, but I might be totally wrong.
Yeah, we've discovered it as after it had already been posted. So we weren't able to name it. We do have other, and we just have at the end a note that says the matters listed on the agenda are those reasonably anticipated by the chairperson, which may be discussed at the meeting. Not all items listed may in fact be discussed, and other items not listed may also be brought up for discussion to the extent permitted by law. But yes, I think we're all sort of navigating open meeting law too, and knowing what we're allowed to do and not do. So I will certainly go with whatever the committee is most comfortable with. I do agree that it feels procedural at this point in the year.
Madam Chairman, we're going to have to do this again in July, aren't we?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, it's not 4 years. We're not governors. We'll be doing this in a few months anyway. So I don't know. I don't think it's that such a big deal one way or the other. In terms of importance, well, on paper, yeah, it is. But the reality is we've overextended ourselves, and we're going to do it again in a couple of months. So I feel we just get it done tonight, and we'll do it again in July.
Okay, Mary, I see your hand up.
So my instant gut feeling is the same as Michael's, except may I impose on Helene as a person who has a legal background to tell us what
Eileen's
her
like, don't
opinion-
impose, don't do it.
All right, well, never mind. If
No,
I'm
no, no. I mean, I guess the answer is it's probably fine either way. That's my sense, you know. I mean, if you want to be extra careful and then put it on the agenda, I mean, it is, you know, voting on the officers. I think it's going to be very pro forma because I think we know. I mean, I very much hope the people who are in those positions right now will continue. And so, you know, I tend to be a more cautious person. I am perfectly happy and comfortable voting tonight, but if there's any kind of question, if you want to do it next time, I think that's also, it'll take us 2 minutes either way. So it's not a probably, you know, a clear answer, but if there's, I mean, especially, I don't know, especially with everything with CPA, if it's just sort of like, we want to be like above board, extra, you know, we're not calling officer votes the last second, we're, you know, really putting it all out there, then maybe do it next time. But either way, I mean, I don't think there's much difference. It's over this next month, the people who are in will stay as they are. Yes. So.
I am not sure what I should do. And I definitely don't want to push this in any direction. Just so we're clear.
Okay.
What's the
Okay,
worst
so
thing
then-
that could happen? They'll make you vote again?
Yes, I guess.
So then I say just go next time. Do it next time.
Okay. And we're okay with me like sort of extending as chair over the next 4 weeks before we get the chance to vote on it?
Oh, there is that too.
Just want to name that for the room now that I've named it.
We're not that important. I mean,
Hey,
You know, I agree, Michael,
What are you
but
trying to say,
it's just,
Michael?
we want to do everything above board, that's all. Oh,
Yeah.
but what she does is very important, but it's just,
let's
You
take
want
a
us
vote
to
for me
above board.
for us all to continue in our roles for the next month before we have an official vote.
Sure. Second.
yeah, my vote.
Thank you, Martha. All in favor?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And we'll officially put it on the agenda so that we can do a vote next meeting. Okay, thank you all. And
Our next meeting, Madam Chairman?
oh, darn it, Michael, we were gonna adjourn. Okay, no, you're not wrong. Okay, so our next meeting would be April 17th.
That is Patriots Day.
It's
Holiday. It's a holiday.
Oh, yeah, that's a
I
holiday.
don't know that we can meet.
No,
Huh.
you cannot meet.
It's not even popping up on my phone as a holiday.
Oh, it's a
Google?
Massachusetts.
The Massachusetts holiday.
Oh, that's true. Okay, and we can't do the April 10th Monday because it's Easter Monday. So that means that we could meet the 24th, or we could, yeah, we could meet the 24th of April.
Sounds good.
Is that okay for everybody?
Sure.
Yes.
Okay, and thank you for the flexibility with, as we're discovering lots of holidays. All right, thank you, everybody, and I will see you April 24th.
Okay.
care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Good night.